up, folks? Thanks for stopping by. Jorge Anito here. Welcome back. I hope this light isn't too much of an issue. Maybe I could stand in front of it there. I want to try doing this from a stood position. I need to get curtains for that sometime. But okay, welcome back to the historical Jesus, Fact or Fake, a project where we are we're creating a case for the historical Jesus based purely on secular sources, often hostile, but surely non-Christian, extra-biblical in every sense of the word. So up until this point, we've discussed Cornelius Tacitus, Pliny the Younger, the Emperor Trajan, Mara Bar Sapien, the Babylonian Talmud, Lucian of Samosata. So we've discussed a wide range of secular sources that, corroborate the story of the historical Jesus. This guy, Jesus of Nazareth, who we read about in our Bibles. And so this whole project, this playlist, is in a response to a recent resurgence in the Jesus mythicism movement. Those that herald Jesus was just a figure of myth, of legend, and there's nothing more to it than that. There's no historical evidence, they say, that would validate the existence of Jesus. And so we want to refute that. And so, leaving the Bible aside, we're just looking at what we can glean from secular sources, ancient testimony about this man named Jesus. We come today to a very unique piece of data, one of my favorite sources. It's so unique. Let me just explain to you why this source is unique. It's Thallus, by the way. We don't actually have the original writing of Thallus. That's one thing that makes it unique. It's unique because historians comfortably date this to 52 AD. 52 AD, when this piece of data is dated by historians. And 3, it doesn't actually even mention Jesus. Thallus doesn't mention Jesus. Possibly he mentions a crucifixion. We're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about something else that he discusses. This piece of data comes to us by way of a guy named Julius Africanus. Just a few extant pieces of manuscript, but he quotes Thallus. And so Julius Africanus wrote a work called Chronicle, where he chronicles the world from beginning to end, or, in his mind what he thought. But he does run across this other guy in ancient history named Thallus. Thallus wrote a book himself called History. And I'm just going to read to you just a little bit from Evidence That Demands a Verdict. And this is what they say about Thallus around AD 55. Now, I said 52 because that is usually what historians will comfortably set this piece of information to. But it ranges anywhere from 52 to 55. The historian Thallus wrote a 3-volume massive account on the Eastern Mediterranean world from the fall of Troy to approximately 50 AD. Though most of his work has been lost, a quotation remains in History of the World written by Julius Africanus around 220 AD. Now, this is what's interesting. I told you that he didn't actually mention Jesus. Thallus didn't mention Jesus. So what is it that he actually said? Well, I'm going to read you the quote that Julius Africanus includes in his Chronicle, and it says this. This is Thallus. On the whole of the world there pressed a most fearful darkness, and the rocks were rent by an earthquake in many places in Judea, and other districts were thrown down. Then Julius Africanus comes in. He says, this darkness, Thallus, in his 3rd book, History, calls, as appears to me without reason, an eclipse of the sun. So this is the deal. This is what's happening. Thallus records a piece of information from 33 AD. And this is that piece of data. And this is what we read in the gospel account when we read about the crucifixion of Jesus. When Jesus is crucified, this darkness pressed in over the land. And so Thallus records this event. He says, look, there was this darkness that came in. He says there was an earthquake, these rocks were busted up, and this eclipse, he calls it an eclipse, which Julius Africanus will then go to refute this. He says this eclipse seems to me without reason, because, and that's just part of living in the observable universe. We can go outside, look up at the sky, and we can see things. And so could the ancients. They could go out there and they could see things. And based on, they have their calendars, they have their way of, determining planet movements and positioning of stars and constellations. And so they know when an eclipse is due. And Thallus knows this, and he says, this seems to me like it was an eclipse, though without reason, because it goes against what we know about eclipses. They don't just happen. But he goes ahead and calls it an eclipse. That's how he reconciles this event in his mind. And so Julius Africanus comes in, and he gives this long argument about why it wasn't an eclipse. We know that it wasn't because of what we observe in eclipses and their movements when they come and so forth. And Julius Africanus will go on to give a lengthy argument and basically attribute this darkness to God. Now, whether you agree with that or not, it is what it is. But we have a secular source that was around during the time of Christ that corroborates the story in the gospel account of the strange natural phenomenon that was happening during Christ's crucifixion. Thallus says, look, they're pressed upon Judea and the surrounding districts this strange darkness. He calls it a fearful darkness because it just came out of nowhere. It happened without reason. This shouldn't be an eclipse, but it feels like one. And there was an earthquake. Rocks rent in two, busted up. And he says, this is just what happened. And Julius Africanus says, hey, it's not an eclipse. It was an act of God. Nonetheless, we have a secular source that corroborates the gospel account. Guys, thank you for checking out this video. Stay tuned because we are drawing nigh to the end of our playlist, our project, with only a few installments left to publish. I want to thank you for journeying with me thus far, and stay tuned because we have some interesting videos to come. There's only a couple left in this playlist, but the last one, man, it's a good one. It's interesting. We're dealing with archaeological content, and man, it packs a powerful punch. It really does. Thanks again. Stay blessed. We'll see you.